It's lovely to see you. How are you today?
Great to be here. I'm good. Thank you, Maria. Looking
That's
forward to our
wonderful.
conversation.
Well, in the introduction, I said that you had started getting into studying and practicing spiritual development at a really tender age, I think, the age of 16. That's a bit unusual. How did that, could you tell us how that came about?
I can, and it was accidental and life-changing. I was a schoolboy in London, 1970, living the London lifestyle, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, we could say. And a friend of mine said, "Look, my grandmother is a nun in a Tibetan monastery in Scotland. I'm going to visit her. Do you want to come?" And to be honest, it sounded like a laugh. So, up we went, two 16-year-olds, to what was then a small place. Now, I think the biggest in Europe. And it was all kind of exotic and, kind of interesting. But halfway through, someone gave me a very classical Buddhist text. And I sat in our room reading it. And Maria, it was literally like a curtain opened. And I knew the truth of this text, and I understood in my bones what it was saying, which was fundamentally that we live in a very small version of reality, and we take that to be the whole version, but there is a much bigger reality. And it was life-changing, because after that, it's the kind of thing you can't unsee. So once, literally from then on, in one way or another, when I look back, that's been the center of my life, is exploring that truth and now teaching it.
And that's phenomenal to discover that so young, because normally you don't have that realization until far later in life. So that must have been huge for you. And as you say, it must have shaped everything you've done since.
It did. And, it's interesting how you say it, because, of course, now looking back, as far as I can remember, it felt very natural. I was lost in the sense of how do I explore this, but I very quickly found people like Alan Watts, Carlos Castaneda became a beacon. I had one friend with whom we were like devoted spiritual explorers. We used to do things like go to Welsh mountains, walk up to the top, and then run down as fast as we could to get into altered states, which we did. We were like determined to, what is this other reality? What are these energy fields? What are they? So yeah, we were very devoted explorers.
Fascinating. That's amazing. So, of course, that's been now translated in the work that you do with leaders. And you talk about a new paradigm of leadership. What is that, and why is it needed?
So the basis is very simple, Maria. Everywhere I go, and I do meet senior leaders all over the world, there is one phenomenon that is universal, because it's embedded in our culture. And it is the fact that our thinking mind, our left brain, has become chronically over dominant, meaning it's the way most people, particularly in work, process the world. So that means that we're disconnected from our emotional self, we're disconnected from our embodied self, from our intuition, and we've forgotten that our thinking mind does not feel anything. So on the one hand, people are navigating ever greater complexity, basically with more than one hand tied behind their back, because so many of our deep, wise faculties have gone offline, and it's simply it's not fit for purpose to navigate complexity primarily through the linear mind. So all of my work is about saying we need to, as Einstein, by the way, said, we need to make our mind our servant. And we need to make it one of our key faculties, sitting in harmony with a deeply embodied self, which feels the world, is grounded, has the feeling of I'm really at home in myself. Most people I meet are simply not at home. They're up here in their minds. And as soon as we begin to do the work, they realize that it's like a kind of exile. So my body grounds me, my body feels the world. My emotions give me empathy, compassion, connection with people. We have far too many leaders walking around who are numb emotionally. They can't make real relationships. Everything is transactional. The world is an object. So in business, it doesn't make sense anymore. In the wider picture, Maria, I think it's the foundation of why we're in such a crisis at the moment. We're disconnected. We're fundamentally, even I would say catastrophically, disconnected. We've also deeply exiled the feminine principle. And that to me is a big topic. We have absolutely, whatever it looks like, a bit more equality, Me Too, is all fine, but we don't address the fundamental truth, which is that we are in a masculine paradigm at the moment. And we're in a toxic version of it because it's disconnected, it's power over, the world is a dead object for me to use. So in the wider picture, I believe that's extremely dangerous. So leader as healer is a call to correction. It's a call to rebalance ourselves. Stop locating myself as I am thinker, but I am here as deep presence, who thinks in a very sophisticated way, who feels, who is embodied, who intuits. That's the work of leader as healer, and that's a new paradigm.
That makes complete and utter sense to me, and I think it's such a strong message. How open are leaders to hearing this?
Very.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is, well, at least the people I work with. I mean, to give you an example, I'm in the middle of a 4-month project, Leader as Healer program with 2 very senior teams from a major European law firm. Now, who would have thought? I teach at the IMD Business School. I teach at the Said Business School, Oxford University. It's a shock. My work is a shock, but I have got very good at explaining it. And within an hour or so, people are like, yes, of course. You're right. I use, doing and being as a fundamental kind of lens. And people realize they got so over-dominated by the doing, the proactive, the fixing, that they have very little access to a deeper sense of being. And so once we understand and people basically agree, then we start the experiential work of reconnecting. And that has, that becomes vulnerable, it becomes easy, difficult, it depends. Because at some point, we really need to address the way we've exiled our emotions. We need to get rid of the idea that there are positive or negative emotions. If we're sad, we need to be sad. If we're fearful, we need to feel the fear, and then it metabolizes inside us. So a lot of the work is about bringing people back from this narrative about life, which is like out here, to know, let's feel what's happening inside. And then we become much more radically present. And interestingly, that's when we start having a much higher level of critical thinking. That's when the ideas come to me. Because we're walking around like this in this kind of frozen tension, doing all our thinking, and it's not even effective. It's actually ridiculous once we realize. And then, like I have a very senior VP client I've just started working with. After a month, I mean, he's really engaging in the one-to-one work. He came to me for one session and he said, Nicholas, I've just noticed in my office, no one is really listening to anyone. He woke up because before he didn't notice that. People don't notice that. That's what I mean by it's normalized. The coma is normalized, and it is a kind of coma, basically.
Wow. Wow. So it's interesting that you say that, you do explain it very well. Actually, it makes complete sense. You do get it. But how difficult is it to do that work on the emotions and to be open to being sad? And because we're so used to sort of like, especially in Britain, the stiff upper lip, isn't it? You
Yes.
don't show any emotions. And we've been through absolute trauma the last 2 years. So how do we get vulnerable?
Haven't we just? Yes. The trauma is huge. And look at what we're creating at the moment. I mean, it's the basic answer, Maria, is that as best I can, I make a very safe space. And that's the key. And then I do exercises that gently evoke a lot of emotion. And once one person starts to cry, let's say, it becomes okay. And then the other thing, of course, Maria, is that we're longing for that. People are longing to be received. People know in their unconscious they're in exile. So if the right space is created, yes, in their own way, people will drop into it and then immediately realize how good it feels. And after 2 days, we go through transformation. I don't use that word lightly. Actually, with this lawyer firm, in the first evening, I said, look, we're going to do transformational work. And one woman said, oh, don't use that word. The firm used it all the time and it's nonsense. I said, okay, I won't use the word. The next evening, after a long day, we were out in a wonderful restaurant for dinner, and they did a toast to me, and she raised her glass and said, Nicholas, today was transformation, which was very touching.
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah,
wonderful. Fantastic. You talk about that embodiment is so essential. So
right.
embodiment, tell me what you mean by embodiment.
So what I mean is that, when we were children, we felt everything through our body. Life was a moment to moment physical experience. Then we get to school, we start getting educated out of that, basically, into our left brain. And very literally, it's like we come up out of our body. Someone actually recently said to me, my body is just something that carries my mind around. And he was happy with that. That's catastrophic, because our body, first of all, it's how we feel grounded. That's a really important word. And most people have not much experience of that. It's like a coming down in our body to our pelvis, our legs, our feet. That's very important in a leader. When she or he enters a room, do people feel that she or he is grounded? Secondly, we begin then to notice that our body is an extraordinary source of information about the world. We feel that's the body is designed for that. When we were children, if a stranger walked in the house, we knew immediately if we trusted them. We knew because we felt with our body. If you look at indigenous tribes, their relationship with the natural world is extraordinary. They feel everything. But that's what we're hardwired for. So the loss of that is huge. You think about people go to a great yoga session or something like that. They come out in the street. For a few minutes, reality is different. It's like the light went on. I feel alive. I feel everything. Everyone wants more of that. And then we switch it off because that's our habit. So embodiment, re-embodiment is a really deep part and fundamental part of the work. In the wider picture, Maria, it's not surprising we don't care about nature because we don't feel our bodies. We don't feel the earth. So of course we can trash it. It's an object out there.
And boy, do we trash it.
And boy, do we trash it.
And actually, not only that, we trash our bodies. We don't look after ourselves and our own health. And the statement you made about, the body is there to carry your brain around. at least look after your body if that's how you feel about it, because you look after your car more often better than you look after yourself.
It's
It's
very true.
incredible. And it's interesting about the point about, trusting your feelings, trusting your intuition, trusting what you're sensing. We sort of, you're right, we switch it off. You end up talking yourself out of it. Your mind talks. I'm imagining myself doing this. I'm going to try not to do it anymore. Okay, you're helping me a
I,
lot here.
Einstein said something amazing. Einstein said the rational mind is a faithful servant. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift. And we have created a society which honors the servant and has forgotten the gift.
Wow, that's such a powerful statement.
From a scientist.
Such a powerful statement. I'm going to have to quote that. I like that. I'm going to write that down. Thank you. So you mentioned yoga, and I know that you practice meditation. You started practicing meditation very young, and for you and for many, mindfulness and meditation is really important. Talk to people like me who haven't quite got there. Tell me about the value. Help me to start to meditate and to be more mindful. I've got to a very old age, and I have not managed to do it.
So why is it important? Firstly, because when the basic principle of mindfulness is that we consciously pay attention, let's say just to our breathing, and we just start to notice every sensation that happens. Now, what's interesting is that we now know, if you're wired up, let's say, we now know that the moment you start to do that, your brainwave frequency changes. This is the marriage of 3,000 years of spiritual knowledge and neuroscience. It's a very good marriage. And what the change is that you start to move from beta wave frequency, which on a screen is very jagged, into alpha wave frequency, which is much more harmonious. It's what all sports people go into when they're in the zone. So it's a deeply harmonized and much more wider field of perception. The principle is to pay attention, and it's nothing to do with thinking. And you don't try and stop thinking. Never try to stop thinking. You just let your thinking be happening. So you become the one who is paying attention. And when you notice you've gone into your thinking, which always happens, you just, okay, let me notice my breathing. But you see, the very act of doing that is you are changing who you are. I'm not mainly the thinker. No, I'm actually awareness. That's the fundamental principle. And that's why it's so transformative. Now, the deeper we go into every culture for thousands of years has mapped consciousness and has mapped that there are many dimensions of reality beyond the one we call reality. So in meditation, you go into a deeper and deeper kind of inner silence, which feels very spacious. It feels very timeless. And it becomes a resource, because if you can stay tapped into that in your day, and I teach people how to do that, it's in the book as well, you're operating on a much bigger game board. You're not obsessed in this little world of detail. You're engaged with that, but you're also sitting in a much bigger space inside. I mean, it's a big topic, but I hope that gives a flavor of the basic thing is to pay attention.
Yeah,
and do it. And I have audios that I give people, and they're very simple. And they're, and one of the CEOs I work with in America, at first so there's mindfulness throughout the day, and then there is, which doesn't take any time. That's very important. It's I teach people, what does it mean to practice mindfulness when you're in a meeting on Zoom? What does it mean to practice mindfulness? It changes everything. Then there is sitting meditation, 20, 30 minutes a day. So this CEO, I remember saying to her at the beginning, you need to start meditating. She was, I have a family, I'm a CEO, I don't have time. I said, I promise you, if you really start to meditate, you'll get far more done, far more easily. I don't have time. Okay, 3 months later, Nicholas, you were right. It's because it changes everything. When we sit in that bigger spaciousness, we get far more done, far more easily. So the whole argument of I don't have time is absolute nonsense.
Okay, I like that. I'm going to pursue that. I'll let you know how I get on. I might be making that call in 3 months' time. You mentioned the book, so I do want to talk a little bit about the book. So this is Leader as Healer, a new paradigm for the 21st century leadership. You talk about in your final chapter, the call. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The call, let's take the example of a real artist, musician, painter. They know that the deepest creative moments come when they are totally silent, as it were, literally or metaphorically, and receptive. And then something starts to come to them. We use the word, the idea came to me. So that's the essence of the call. And in the chapter on purpose, I ask people to ask themselves 2 questions. The first is, what is the work that is mine to do? That's a very important alignment. Not what I should do, could do. What's really me to do in this world? And then the deeper question is, what is it that is being asked of me now? That takes us to a whole other level of surrender, beyond what I want to do. No, we're fed up with you. Actually, it would be like when an actor used to come to me, I was 20 years a theatre director, and she or he would say, I don't know what to do with this Shakespeare speech. And I would say, that's not the right question, because the only thing that's actually interesting is what it will do with you. And when an actor would say, okay, I think I understand, and they would start to be receptive, really receptive, and they would start to say one line and suddenly be flooded with an emotion they could not possibly have planned, that's when we're in a much more interesting territory. So the call is, does a leader, does a team have the capacity to go into such a listening that they begin to understand what's being asked of them now, not what they want to do. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful way of...
It's a new paradigm.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm doing that with senior teams. Once we've done all the work and we've really reconnected and people are much more present, then we can sit together as a team in deep meditation. And I'll ask the question, so what is being asked of us? And people start to get downloads. It's like downloads. And it's nothing to do with what you would have thought you would answer.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask myself that question. There is so much I have taken from this discussion, this chat. I feel I might be entering a new paradigm. Nicholas, I hope you have enjoyed it yourself.
I've enjoyed it enormously. Your receptivity is lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank everybody for listening to the Speaker Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. And you can keep up with future episodes on the Speakers Associates website, which is speakersassociates.com, or your favorite podcast app. Now, if you want to book Nicholas to speak at your next event, get in touch with Speakers Associates in plenty of time so you won't be disappointed, and make sure you grab a copy of Leader as Healer, a new paradigm for 21st century leadership. Thank you. I will see you next week.